My name is Andy Meverden. I'm the Director of Chaplaincy for CBAmerica. I had the privilege of coming here last year with the outgoing director, Al Russell. And we had a chance to conduct these action workshops. And I got to tell you, I enjoy coming here. This is like highlight of the year. And I just wish I could be doing something else right now. No, I'm just kidding. There's so many fun things to do. The firing range is going to be opened up here pretty soon. I flew, otherwise I would have brought a firearm as well. But anyway, I'm glad to see you. How many are here for the first one? Weren't here last time? So we've got, all right, we're going to do a repeat somewhat. We've got 3 different chaplains who are going to share in just a moment. But I want to give you a little bit of history, where chaplaincy began in the CB movement. It actually occurred in 1951 when the Korean War broke out. I don't know if you know that. There were 9,000 chaplains in World War II total. Army, Air Corps, Navy, and Army, about 9,000. There were no CB chaplains directly. They were numbered from the American Baptists, who later became part of our ministry and missions and other things like that. So we do have chaplain history back into World War II. But our first chaplains were appointed and sent during the Korean War. I think 52, 53 are when the first ones went into action on the South Korean peninsula. And then from that point on, our endorsement, our coverage was with the National Association of Evangelicals. So we were underneath them from 52 forward till about 1982. And then we became recognized by the Department of Defense, the Veterans Health Agency, Department of Justice, so the federal agencies. So from that point on, we became our own endorsing agent. As I mentioned, first time, we have about 160 chaplains right now, about 100 or 110 federal, that's military, VA, and Bureau of Prisons primarily. And then we have about 50 or so civilian, hospital, hospice, veterans groups, motorsports clubs, a number of creative ministries in that regard. Today, we're going to continue the way we began last week. We're going to ask 3 different chaplains to come and tell you about their ministries. We have one from the Veterans Health Administration, a former Army chaplain. This guy's been at it forever, and he epitomizes that term, chaplain for life. And we're excited to have Dave Lundell be our first chaplain to come and share what God has in his heart. This guy's developed a lot of neat things, and he's been slowly sharing them with me over time. There you go, Dave.
Looks like...
Hook that on your belt.
Does this thing work?
I think it does. Hook that on your belt, and I'll attach this to your T-shirt. Let me stick it right here. It worked good last time.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What are just some of the distinguishing things that differentiate a chaplain from a traditional pastor? What makes their service unique?
I'm going to talk about that.
I'm going to let Chaplain Lundell address that, because he served in 2 federal agencies, in the Army, the U.S. Army Department of Defense, then under the Veterans Health Administration as a hospital chaplain. So thank you.
Yeah. Also, we have an hour. We have 3 guys, 20 minutes each. They'll cramp us. All right, let's start here. Oh. Anyway, breaking everything. It still works. Amazing. Okay. I know I got pine cones in here, and I don't think in the Garden of Eden God had pine cones. But anyway, dust. Guys, I'm here today to remind us that God can take the dust of the earth and make a man. Right? God can take clay and make a pot usable in his kingdom. Right? God's attributes confirm that he is sovereign, wise, powerful, and in whatever your situation in life, now, I mean, I don't know you guys at all, but whatever your situation in life, I want you to know that God is at work. Romans 8:28 is a real verse, right? And you're a bunch of Baptists sitting there like Presbyterians.
Amen.
Yeah. So out of the dust, God can create man. Out of clay, God can make a man into a usable pot. Out of a liberal social worker, I was a social worker in the state of Minnesota first. Out of a liberal social worker, yes. Out of a young Air Force lieutenant during Vietnam, I went in 67, given to beer, motorcycles, and cigars. God can make a believer. That's what he did to me. He can make a disciple. He can take that disciple and make him into a minister. He can take a minister and make him into a pastor. And he can take a pastor and make him into a chaplain. And there is a difference going from pastor to chaplain. Out of combat, I'm a combat veteran. In my unit in Iraq, we had 14 killed in action. I'd been their chaplain for 3 years, almost 3 years prior to the maneuver. I knew every one of them. I had to, officiate at their M16s and helmets and boots in the desert. Out of combat, out of PTSD, I'm diagnosed by the VA with PTSD. Out of leukemia, I'm service-connected with leukemia to Iraq. Out of combat, out of PTSD, out of leukemia, God can equip a chaplain for the VA. That's what I experienced. In the VA, I have been given open access to reach veterans, those in Tucson, where I work, veterans who others can't seem to reach, veterans who others, it seems, won't reach. And a VA chaplain coming out of the military, out of the background that God has enabled me to have. Even my illnesses and injuries, God has taken all of that and weaved that together into a vessel that sends me out 5 days a week down in Tucson to walk into veterans' hospital rooms who are facing another combat mission, life and death. Cancer, surgeries, all kinds of things, heart attacks, self-referrals into our 40-bed inpatient psych ward because of suicidal ideations or excessive alcohol use. God has privileged me to be able to walk into these guys' lives and to try to relate to them. And it's a beautiful thing. I am different than a pastor. I am a combat veteran chaplain who has been under fire. And these guys pick it up. I was 6.5 years in San Diego at the outpatient OEF Iraq Afghan combat vet outpatient mental health clinic dealing with their PTSD and military sexual trauma. By the way, more men in the Army are diagnosed with MST than women are. One day I was talking to a guy who'd been a Navy SEAL. He had tattoos, sitting in my office in a strap t-shirt. Somebody dropped something out in the hall. I mean, a book or something. Bam! Man, he and I jumped. He looked at me, he said, "You're one of us, aren't you?" That opens doors. When God puts us in a ministry where we can relate to the kind of people that God has made us to be. Hello? Pray for that. In your life, wherever you're at, believe that God can be at work if you just give yourself to Him, yield to Him, follow Him, study His words, pray, seek His leading and the Spirit of God in your life. Like the guy said before me on whatever he was here talking about, I sat there and listened. But he said, if you've got a pulse, God's got a plan for your life. And I think that's true. All right, let me run through what I've got here. I've got stuff to show you. I've got some stuff here that I can make available to you after our session together. I'm sitting over here. I'll show you what I got. Yeah, okay, quickly to run through this. I have a Master of Divinity and a THM from Western. I've got 12 years in the Air Force Intelligence, not chaplain. Not chaplain, big time. Not even churched. Not even religious, okay, you got it? I got 18 years in the Army, and then 8.5 years now in the VA, a year in Portland, up here in Portland at the VA doing my clinical pastoral education, 6.5 in San Diego. And by the way, in San Diego, the clinicians, the psychologists, psychiatrists, had a team of 12 of those and about 20 social work therapists. I was their full-time chaplain resource, dedicated to serve and help them. These clinicians, PhD level guys and gals, they got to know me. I was honest and upfront to them. I let them know I'm a chaplain, I'm a combat veteran, I believe in Christ, I believe in the scriptures, I have an answer for these guys. They sensed it in me, they trusted me. My whole 6.5 years, I averaged 3 to 5 new referrals every week. I had an evangelistic ministry that allowed me to sit in my office and simply follow up on contacts these unbelievers were sending me. You can't design a better ministry than that. I don't think. Down in Tucson now, I'm the supervisory chaplain. The chaplain-elect, John Sankey, knew me. He was in the 1st Infantry Division with me. He postponed his retirement until I could get there to take over for him. We got 285 beds on a 116-acre campus. We got the largest blind rehabilitation center in the VA. We got cardio. Phoenix sends cardio people down to us. This big inpatient psych unit, SARTEP, Substance Abuse Recovery and Retraining Program. I teach in there. The guy before, he said, if men get it, others, what did he say?
Everybody else gets it.
Everybody gets it, yeah, something like that. Everybody's better off. I teach us a lesson to the substance abuse people. It's entitled, Got It? With a question mark. And I teach them that you ain't got it till you got it. Anyway, I got a good lesson. And they stayed in my classes. They stayed. We got hospice, Alzheimer's, we have deaths every day. I've got 6 other chaplains working under me. My ministry down there is to cover the emergency department, the clinical decision unit, the step-down unit, 2 South medical surgical, and 1 West, the psych ward. I have groups in 1 West, the inpatient psych ward. I teach on forgiveness. I developed a class on forgiveness, a lesson. I was assigned in San Diego by the MST team of psychologists. They said, Chaplain, some of these female veterans have been gang raped by the members of their own units. Chaplain, come and teach forgiveness. I did. And I've got a class that holds attention. The staff in our 1 West, they love it. In polytrauma, we're using a book by Chuck Swindoll, David. Anybody here seen that book? Powerful. Talks about the man David as a combatant. How he lives and develops his life by Chuck Swindoll. In chronic pain class down in Tucson, wherever I am. In Tucson, we've got this chronic pain group that veterans come in that can't resolve pain. Now they've had pharmacy, they've had psychiatry, psychology, surgery. Everybody there from the medical community is going to help them with their pain. And when I start this class, I say, now you've all had this wonderful training, and I'm the last one in your curriculum, the chaplain. I say, how many of you here have been healed of your pain? None of them. So what do you think I have for you? I taught this the first time last month-ish, and Eve, the gal that heads up the chronic complaint, she said, Chaplain, we're going to have a couple of doctors and a therapist pop in to see how it goes. That means they're checking on it. They came in and they got my little handout, which is available to any of you. They sat down and they engaged in the class. One of them told me afterward, Chaplain, we've never heard anything like this in the VA before. What I do as a chaplain, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a social worker. I'm a chaplain sent there by the Conservative Baptist Association. I'm there to represent my church, my faith, my beliefs, and they know it. I let them know that. And my relationship with them is such that they sense a trust. They send patients to me. Polytrauma. I got one guy in my polytrauma class that has 7 Purple Hearts. I mean, you talk about veterans. Let me get that. Okay. Yeah. Well, I got too much to say. Okay. The big thing I do, I wanted to share this. One of the big, chaplains don't offer treatment. That's the one. But veterans come into me, especially with PTSD, and they come in with legs missing, arms missing, with a prosthetic skull. You know, their skull bone was decaying, and they had to put in a prosthetic skull. I mean, all kinds of stuff that comes into my office. And the big issue of these guys and gals coming in to see a chaplain is they come in and say, Chaplain, where was God in this life? Chaplain, I was maybe raised in a Christian home, and I took God into combat with me. I trusted Him to have my back and to take care of me and watch over me, and look what happened. I've had, I don't know, maybe sailors come in and describe to me their view of God in sailor terms. A pastor may not like that. A chaplain loves it. I want these guys to unload their heart, their mind, their thinking. I need to know where they're at. And I need to take my callous, non-church background and relate to these guys and help them move a little bit. See, this is evangelism. To me, evangelism isn't necessarily leading someone to Christ. Amen. When that happens, I carry the bridge to life. I use it most every day. Get to go through it with a veteran or two. I do that. But if I can move a veteran from here to here, I have succeeded. My prayer every morning when I get up is, God, today, can you give one little opportunity today that's going to be noted in eternity? No, it's the German 12. God, in eternity, is there going to be something that happens today? And you know, it may not even be in the life of a veteran. It might be in my life. God uses veterans in my life. It is exciting. Anyway, what I do, the Odyssey, Chaplain, where was God? When I got leukemia, I asked the same question. God was there. God knew this. I have found, and I use a book right here, and I cover oncology, by the way, a book by John Piper, Don't Waste Your Cancer. He talks in here about cancer can be a gift. It can be your friend. I ask people, is there anything good that's come out of this? Put Chaplain for the summer sports clinic in San Diego for 5 years. That's where we have severely disabled veterans come to San Diego for surfing, kayaking, sailing, track and field, whatever, all this stuff. I went to the surfing venue one day and I went out there and they catered the lunches. So I got this wonderful lunch. I thought, well, where is Dave going to sit? And I saw a picnic table over there with a kid in a wheelchair and like 4 other people, maybe his family. I go over and I say, I'm the chaplain. Would you mind if I join you guys for lunch? And they said, no, chaplain, have a seat. I sat down. I said to the kid in the wheelchair, I said, what happened? His dad interrupted. He said, Chaplain, my son was the first U.S. Army chaplain assistant in Iraq to be injured in an IED. He was a quadriplegic. I mean, it was an honor for me as an Army chaplain, you know, to sit with this guy. And I asked the question I ask every day to people within weeks of death, people facing things. I say, is there anything good? And the kid sitting there, a young man, quadriplegic. Is there anything good that came out of this? His dad butted in and said, Chaplain, this is the best thing that happened to my son or to our family. The wife echoed that. The daughter even shared things. The son shared things. You know, where his life was at, where their life was at. This happened. It turned them around. Guys, we have to have the courage to not confront, to engage people where they're at. As anything, I had a guy getting chemo the other day down there, sucking juice, you know, like his wife sitting there. I did that, man. I had 5 chemos, lost my hair, looked like this guy. Anyway, by the way, if you want good hair, try chemo. But anyway, I asked this guy getting chemo. He had a tumor removed. The tumor was coming back. Chemo wasn't doing it. He said, Chaplain, they give me about 2 months to live. His wife sitting there, and I said, I got to ask you guys a question. I said, has anything good come out of this cancer? They lit up. They lit up. See, a psychiatrist won't ask that, right? A psychologist won't ask, has anything good come out of this evil? Doctors, the chaplain. But by golly, we have to be ready to back up, you know, to reinforce with how good, how glorious God is. That's my treatment. I engage veterans in attribute meditation. Now, time's up. I have here, I've got, okay, veterans. You go into a Christian bookstore and buy a book on attributes, you will not find a book with 48 attributes. You know, maybe 12, 14, how many scrolls you got, whatever. I think an infinite God has infinite attributes. I have 48 attributes that veterans give me. One guy we're talking about, his dad. His dad's a drunk, was beat him. He's had the terriblest father in his days. But this kid was a believer. And we got thinking, well, wait, God is your father. He said, Chaplain, you're right. I've had a wonderful father. He said, that needs to be one of your attributes of God. Tozier doesn't list Father is an attribute, and I do. I've taken and written different attributes to relate to post-traumatic stress, combat, traumatic evil. 8 lines on here to describe the attribute and relate it to that. And I've got a bunch of them up here. My time's up. I got so much to do and say, but that's it, man. That's your next. So I'm going to have stuff up here that you can get. Anybody that wants to see me afterwards, okay?
Chaplain Dave, what time are you going to leave today?
I have to leave at the end of the session.
At the end of this session.
No. I'm scared for the meal, man.
Okay, good. So if someone would like to have dinner with Chaplain Dave, would you be open to that? If anybody, you know, you got a question or would you like to have dinner with?
I'd like to have dinner.
Okay, I got it. Like that.
All right.
All right. You guys work that out.
I'm Tom.
Okay, Tom. Thank you very much.
You can call me Major Tom.
Major Tom.
Call me Lieutenant Colonel.
There you go.
Chaplains do not have command authority.
That's right.
I cannot tell a soldier to pick up a cigarette butt.
I'm Major Tom from Ground Control.
Hey, that's great. Thanks, Steve. Wow. Wow. That's all I can say is wow. Well, we're going to go from a retired Army chaplain, former Air Force lieutenant in intelligence, and he used to say Army intelligence was an all right. Well, intelligence was an oxymoron. But seriously, now we're gonna go to active duty today, and Randy Brandt, just up the road at now it's called JBLM, Joint Base Lewis McChord. We used to call it McChord, Fort Lewis, and then McChord Air Force Base. And Randy's got an interesting position now. It's broad, and we're going to ask Randy to kind of share. And Randy, save some time too for questions since you're active duty right now. I think there may be some things that you can address.
Gonna be one, gotta be a big red one.
That's right.
All right. Well, good afternoon. I'm Randy Brandt. Right now I'm active duty Army chaplain. I started out in the Air Force in 1976. I was a radical hippie teenager kind of thing. My dad was in the Army and I ran away from that to get as far away as I could. I was not a Christian at the time. I joined the Air Force. I became a cook. That was my goal in life, was to be a nutritionist. I wanted to enlist and get the benefits of the educational benefits, and I did that in the Air Force. But through the process, I got introduced to some friends that led me down a different road through drugs and alcohol. I ended up as a confirmed alcoholic, diagnosed, and drug addict. All the different measures, all the way to shooting up and going down that road. And God finally got my attention. Took a bad trip with some LSD and went to hell with Alice Cooper, if anybody remembers that album. But and ended up down that road and had the hell scared out of me. Jesus pointed out to me. He closed an entire Air Force base in I think it was Montana somewhere back in the 70s. And 3,000 folks moved to where I was at in Scott Air Force Base, Illinois. And 2 of them were on fire, Baptist Christians, and they both started hitting me one after another, whistling while they worked, enjoying life, passing out tracts, here's what the Bible teaches, kind of thing, making sure I had, and I did have a Gideon. How many veterans do you have? Did y'all get Gideons when you went through basic training? Remember that? That small little Gideon Bible. Absolutely. I still had that. And so I'd take those tracts and I'd read it, compare it with what was in that little Gideon Bible that I had, and man, John 3 finally just came alive to me. In John 3, he said, "You got to be born again." And I just, I knelt in my barracks room, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, and in between the spin grind and the wash cycle, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and He put me on a road of change ever since then. In spite of all of that track history with alcohol and drugs, I was able to complete military service, do another 11 years in the National Guard. I did 4 years active duty with the Air Force, got out, went to Bible College and Seminary in Colorado, a small college called Western Bible College back then. No longer exists. It's merged and become Colorado Christian University today in Colorado. And then went to Denver Seminary, the sister seminary for Molten Elmo or Western Seminary up here in Portland. Got called to get back into the military. God used all of that stuff that I went through to say, there are soldiers, there are folks out there that have gone through similar experiences that you went through. And sure enough, God started leading me people that have had problems like that. And a lot of soldiers have problems with what? Drugs and alcohol, right? I came out of the post-Vietnam era in the 70s, a lot of soldiers had problems with drugs and alcohol during that time. So I went down that road, and God used that, which I experienced, how He saved me out of that to start helping others. And lo and behold, I end up in the Army. God opens that door during the Gulf War. So 91, he sends me off to war, my very first assignment with the Gulf War coming on in 91. And I've been at it ever since as an Army chaplain. But where do I end up? In the last few years, I end up in jail. The Army has a maximum security prison. Everybody know about that one? It's in Kansas, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. You don't want to end up there on the inside anyway. That's a maximum security prison. That was my last duty station before I came up to the northwest. But let me tell you just about 3 guys that I ran into in that jail. Folks that are sent there, we've got about 460 on an average that are there every day of the year. And folks that are there for a sentence of anything over 10 years. So you got 10 years plus, all the way up to death sentence. We've got 6 guys on death row right now. All right, let me introduce you to 3 guys that I've had the privilege of ministering to. And again, foundational to all of my ministry, everything that God brought me through and began to use in my life, I had to have what I processed was a theology. When you deal with people that have been at their worst, that have lost everything because of poor decisions that they've made in life. A moment's decision can change your life forever. A moment's lapse in judgment, making that wrong choice, can change your life forever. And 468 of these guys are there because of that. Not that they were bad people, they just really made some stupid decisions in life. First guy let me introduce you to is a fellow by the name of Nidal. You may remember him from Fort Hood several years ago. He was an Army psychiatrist and rank of major. Became radicalized through some connections with Islam while he was a psychiatrist in Washington, D.C. On a particular day down at Fort Hood, he's there serving as a psychiatrist in the Readiness Processing Center for troops that are getting ready to deploy to war. There are hundreds of them processing through the center. And they're all expecting treatment from people that are there to help them. Medical folks, JAG folks, lawyers that help them do wills and powers of attorney. Expecting folks to help them get ready for war. And all of a sudden, this major stands up, shouts, Allah Akbar, and starts shooting randomly. 13 people lost their lives that day, 30 wounded. Tragic day in military history. Nidal was shot himself by a female police officer and paralyzed. He's now a paraplegic, but he's on death row in Leavenworth prison. One of my jobs, as I went to work every day as a prison chaplain for the United States Army, would be to visit every death row inmate every day, 365 days a year. A chaplain has to put eyes on these death row inmates. And so I would get the privilege of walking by Nidal's cell. Big glass front, he's in there in his wheelchair. And again, a theology of redemption. Can God save a man like that? I believe he can. I believe my God is powerful enough to do anything. And so when I walk by that cell, I have a chance to engage that man. And he engages me, very personal. And he sits in his wheelchair, he rolls up, he opens up his front. Chaplain, can we talk? I say, yeah, I'd love to talk. Chaplain, can I read some passage to you? Sure, go ahead. Can I read something to you? And we begin a dialogue. Every day that I would go by, we would have a dialogue. And we would end with, Chaplain, we're not going to agree, but I'm going to pray for you. I said that you will know the truth. I said, Nidal, I'm going to pray for you too. I'm going to pray the exact same thing. That our God, my God, will show you the truth. Then I move on to the next cell. He hasn't gotten saved yet. But as a chaplain, again, you've heard that several times. It's not our job to save people. That's not what we're supposed to. God does that. But to plant the seed, to give that gospel truth, that, he would agree, he would talk about Jesus in the Quran, talk about the miraculous things that Jesus did in the Quran that Muhammad never did. And we would agree on those things and share them. I said, wow, Jesus is pretty incredible dude, isn't he? Yeah, he is. But being able to get him to that point of saying, and I want to worship him as opposed to something. We're not there yet. So I would ask you to pray for Nidal. The theology of redemption says that as long as he has breath, there's a chance for God to bring him to a point of salvation. And I pray for him. And I would ask you to do that too. Another man, guy from this area, actually up in Fort Lewis, his name is Robert. Robert went to Afghanistan. A lot of folks went to war over these last 14 years. I went to Iraq. Dave mentioned that combat experience. I was there for a year in 2004 and 5. Combat chaplain with the 1st Infantry Division, Big Red 1. And a lot of folks have seen combat. And combat does something to you. It does. There are a lot of folks that come back with PTSD. But while you're there, it does something. When you see your friends get blown up in front of you, when you see little kids, 10 years old, dropping hand grenades from a bridge into a Humvee so that it would kill 5 people inside that Humvee. One of the guys from our unit actually fell on that hand grenade one day. Sacrificed his life, Ross McGinnis. He's one of the guys that got a Medal of Honor for saving the life of the 4 other guys in there, in that vehicle. A 10-year-old kid dropped a hand grenade from a bridge. When you see that happen all the time, women coming out with IEDs under their burqas, walking into the crowd, detonating, self-detonating, and decimating a marketplace. When you see that happen, and you're seeing that all the time, something happens. And for Robert, it pushed him over the edge somehow. And one night he snuck out of the fob, and he went into the village, and he attacked several homes. He killed about 17 Afghan civilians, to include women and children. It was. Ended up at Leavenworth. Well, while he was up at Fort Lewis, a friend of mine, Lance Hohenstreet, and he's a chaplain up there at the prison at Fort Lewis, was able to start talking to him and sharing the gospel with him and bringing light into his darkness. And as a result of that, Robert accepted Christ up at Fort Lewis in a cell before he was transferred down to Leavenworth. Well, when he got down to Leavenworth, I had a chance to meet with him and help him get a little bit further in his Christian walk, to disciple him a little bit, to get him to a place where he could, again, begin to live and live in the light and walk in the light. Dealing with his shame, dealing with the pain that he caused his own family, all the families that were torn apart as a result of his barbaric actions. I had the privilege of baptizing him before I left to come up here to Fort Lewis. Robert's a new Christian. He's a believer. He is redeemed. Redemptive theology changes people. Even folks that have done heinous things in life. He's a changed man. The third guy, I'll finish with this one. His name is Scott. Scott was actually a prison guard at the prison in Leavenworth. He was E7, Sergeant First Class. He was in charge of the correctional specialists, that's what we call them nowadays, correctional specialists that run the protection of all the inmates, making sure that they're where they're supposed to be and making sure they manage the security and safety and security of the institution there. So he's a man in charge of all these other men and women that are providing safety and security for the prison and for the inmates that are there. Somehow he lost his way. He ended up getting involved in pornography. And with that involvement in pornography, he started getting further. Rather than just reading things, he started acting on things, and he ended up molesting his stepdaughter. In the midst of that darkness, where does he turn? He's hurting. He started opening the Bible. He started reading the Bible. Looking for help, looking for healing. Redemptive theology. That's a heinous thing. You know, most of us as men, you know, if we think of somebody touching our daughter, we'd want to, man, I want to kill him. Right? It's hard to forgive somebody like that. It's hard to work with somebody like that. But again, what's the theme that we talked about? Working with folks that a lot of folks choose not to work with, or can't work with, or can't reach, right? Robert was crying out for help, crying out for healing. He turned himself in. He saw in Scripture that what he did was wrong, and he knew he had to address that. He had to confess that, and he did, realizing that it would end everything for him. It ended his career. It didn't end his family. His wife kind of distanced herself, kids distanced themselves, but they're not divorced at this point. there's some healing that needs to happen, obviously. But, and then he gets sent to prison, 50 years. The next 50 years of his life, he's going to be locked up in this jail. No, by the way, this prison, statistically, 76% of the guys that are there because of sexual crimes. 76% are there because of sexual crimes. It's incredible. So dealing with these folks, redemptive theology. Begin to work with Robert. Robert is just thirsting and hungering for truth, for healing, for redemption. And he accepts Jesus Christ. And he is a born-again Christian today. I had a chance to baptize him too before I left to come up here. The lives of men that society pretty much locks away, pretty much gives up on. A lot of us are scared to have them as neighbors. And yet, I had the privilege of being called on to minister to men like that. Folks that have had some damage because of war, yeah. Some folks that have been radicalized, yeah. No excuse in my mind for that, but God can still work with them. God can still bring healing. That's just a little bit of my story. As an Army chaplain, there's some things that I've been able to do and experience. Right now I'm up at Fort Lewis. I'm working with a totally different audience, a medical command up there. Totally different world. But there's still a prison up there, and every other Sunday I get to go in. I volunteer my time there. I'll preach there every day Sunday. Just to keep in touch with those guys. And Matthew 25 is real to me. Make sure that I remember those guys in prison. I would ask you to pray for them too. Any questions or comments?
I got a question.
Yeah.
Dave, I believe, is what he said. There's a difference between pastors and chaplains, but he never explained what the difference is.
A chaplain is paid to go where pastors can't. The pastor can't go to the battlefield. I can go to the battlefield. They've been to the battlefield. We've been shot at. We're there with the soldiers when the bombs are going off. The pastors are back here taking care of families and doing a great job taking care of families. But the chaplains are on the battlefield forward with the soldiers, bringing God's soldiers.
Let's see. What's his? Dave was sharing that